18 years. That's how long I gave them everything I had. Kenneth Miller? That's me. And let me tell you, when I walked into Dataflow Solutions at 34, I thought I'd found my forever home. Fresh-faced, eager to prove myself, ready to climb that corporate ladder one rung at a time. I had no idea I was walking into a carefully orchestrated nightmare that would take nearly 2 decades to fully reveal itself. But here's the thing about nightmares. Sometimes the monster under the bed is real, and sometimes you have to become something they never saw coming. I remember that first day like it was yesterday, September 15th, 2005. The Twin Towers attacks were still fresh in everyone's minds. The economy was shaky, and landing a job at a growing tech company felt like winning the lottery. I walked through those glass doors wearing my best suit, the only good one I owned, clutching a briefcase that held more hope than actual experience. "Welcome to the family," CEO Marcus Thompson said, shaking my hand with that $1 million smile that would later haunt my nightmares. "We're building something special here, Kenneth. Something that's going to change how businesses handle their data forever." I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. Those early years were intoxicating. I wasn't just an employee. I was a soldier in a digital revolution. Dataflow was expanding rapidly, and they needed someone who could build systems that wouldn't just work today, but would scale for tomorrow. That someone turned out to be me. I threw myself into that job like a man possessed. 60-hour weeks became 70, 70 became 80. I learned every system, every process, every line of code that kept Dataflow running. While other employees went home at 5, I stayed until 2 in the morning, hunched over servers that hummed like mechanical hearts in the basement. My daughter Emma was 8 when I started. Beautiful, bright-eyed, always asking when Daddy would be home for dinner. Too often, the answer was, "Not tonight, sweetheart." "Kenneth, you missed her piano recital again," my wife Sarah would say, her voice heavy with disappointment that we both pretended was just fatigue. "She played Für Elise. She's been practicing for months." I'd find Emma asleep in her bed, her sheet music scattered on the nightstand, and I'd stand in her doorway watching her breathe. Sometimes I'd slip inside and kiss her forehead, whispering apologies she couldn't hear. "Daddy's building something important," I'd tell her sleeping form. "Something that'll make your future better." What a naive fool I was. By year 3, I'd designed the entire backup system that would become Dataflow's crown jewel. Every night at 3 a.m., my automated processes would create perfect snapshots of every client's data, storing them across multiple redundant servers. It was elegant, efficient, and absolutely bulletproof, or so I thought. Late one night in 2008, while debugging a routine maintenance script, I found it. A vulnerability so subtle, so deeply buried in the system architecture that it had gone unnoticed for months. Someone with the right access could slip through this digital crack and potentially compromise everything we'd built. My first instinct was to send an immediate alert to Marcus. My fingers were already typing the email when something made me pause. This wasn't just any vulnerability. It was in a section of code that only 3 people had access to modify. Me, Marcus, and his nephew Jake, who'd been quietly added to the development team 6 months earlier, despite having a computer science degree from a community college and exactly 0 real-world experience. I saved the email as a draft and decided to investigate further. What I found in the system logs made my blood run cold. The vulnerability wasn't accidental. Someone had deliberately introduced it, cleverly disguised as a routine optimization update. And according to the timestamps, it had been added during a weekend when only senior staff had building access. I spent the next week discreetly analyzing every code change, every login, every digital footprint. The evidence was circumstantial, but damning. Someone was planning something, and they'd been planning it for months. Instead of reporting it immediately, I made a decision that would define the next 15 years of my life. I quietly fixed the vulnerability while documenting everything I'd found. Every screenshot, every log entry, every suspicious modification. I saved it all to an encrypted external drive that never left my possession. Call it paranoia. Call it intuition. Call it the first spark of the survival instinct that would eventually save my life. Because data flow wasn't the family Marcus claimed it was. It was a carefully constructed house of cards. And I was about to discover I'd been designated as the fall guy from day one. The first sign that something was seriously wrong came in year 7. I'd just finished implementing a revolutionary data compression algorithm that increased our storage efficiency by 40%. The breakthrough was entirely mine. Weeks of 18-hour days, sacrificing weekends with Emma, who was now 15 and barely speaking to me. "Dad, you missed my basketball championship," she said one evening, not even looking up from her homework. "Again." "I know, sweetheart. This project is just really important. Once it's finished, there's always another project." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "Mom says you love your computers more than us." I wanted to tell her that everything I did was for her, for our family's future. Instead, I just stood there, watching my daughter slip away one missed moment at a time. But the real punch in the gut came the following Monday. I walked into the quarterly all-hands meeting expecting recognition, maybe even a promotion. Instead, I watched Marcus take the stage and announce Dataflow's revolutionary new compression technology. My revolutionary new compression technology, as if he developed it himself. This breakthrough represents months of dedicated work by our leadership team. Marcus beamed to the assembled crowd. It's innovations like this that keep Dataflow ahead of the competition. Not once did he mention my name. Not once did he acknowledge the countless hours I'd poured into making his company more profitable. I sat in the back row, invisible among my own colleagues, watching the CEO steal credit for my life's work with the casual confidence of a man who knew no one would dare challenge him. After the meeting, I approached Marcus in his office. "I think there might have been some confusion about the compression project," I said carefully. "I developed that algorithm over the past few months and—" "Kenneth?" Marcus interrupted, not even looking up from his computer. "I appreciate your contributions to the project, but let's be clear about something. Everything developed on company time, with company resources, belongs to the company. That means it belongs to me. We're not running a charity here." The dismissal in his voice was unmistakable. I wasn't a valued team member. I wasn't family. I was a replaceable cog in his machine, useful only as long as I generated profit and stayed silent. That night, I started keeping more detailed records. Year 10 brought Jake's promotion to Senior Systems Architect, a position that should have been mine. Jake, who couldn't debug a simple script without help. Jake, who'd never worked a weekend in his life. Jake, whose greatest technical achievement was successfully installing Windows without calling tech support. It's about fresh perspectives, Marcus explained when I questioned the decision privately. Jake brings a modern approach to our challenges. Sometimes experience can be a liability, Kenneth. It makes people resistant to change. What he really meant was, Jake would do what he was told without asking inconvenient questions. I watched Jake stumble through projects I could have completed in my sleep. I watched him take credit for solutions I'd quietly suggested. I watched him fail upward, while I remained frozen in the same position I'd held for a decade, despite being responsible for systems that generated millions in revenue. The breaking point came during Emma's senior year of high school. I'd promised, sworn on everything sacred, that I would be at her graduation ceremony. Nothing, absolutely nothing, would keep me from watching my daughter walk across that stage. The night before graduation, at 8 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Emergency server maintenance required. Need you in office ASAP. Client data at risk. I stared at that message for 10 minutes. Emma was upstairs putting the finishing touches on her graduation speech. Sarah was pressing my suit for tomorrow's ceremony. Our relatives were driving in from 3 states away. I have to go to work, I told Sarah, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Kenneth? No, not tonight. Please. There's a critical server issue. If I don't fix it, there's always a critical issue. Sarah's voice cracked. When is it enough? When do we matter more than that place? I worked through the night fixing a problem that could have easily waited until Monday. The emergency was a routine maintenance task that Jake should have handled, but had somehow screwed up. By the time I finished, dawn was breaking, and I had just enough time to shower and race to the graduation ceremony. I made it with 5 minutes to spare. Sliding into the auditorium seat beside Sarah just as the principal began calling names. When Emma walked across that stage, she looked out into the crowd, found my face, and gave me the smallest, saddest smile I'd ever seen. She knew. She knew I'd almost missed the most important moment of her young life for a job that would replace me without a second thought. That night, Emma hugged me outside the school. Thanks for making it, Dad, she whispered. I know how much work means to you. Her words weren't angry. They were resigned. My 18-year-old daughter had accepted that her father's priorities were fundamentally broken, and that acceptance hurt more than any accusation could have. I realized then that I'd been playing a rigged game for 15 years. While I'd been building their empire, they'd been building my prison. Every late night, every missed family moment, every sacrifice I'd made, it had all been feeding a machine that would eventually devour me. But machines have weaknesses, and I'd been documenting their vulnerabilities for a very long time. By year 15, the writing was on the wall in letters 10 feet tall. Marcus had brought in a consulting firm to optimize our human resources allocation. Translation: they were looking for people to cut, and longtime employees with high salaries were prime targets. I wasn't stupid. I could see the storm coming. Jake was positioning himself as the future of the IT department, while systematically undermining anyone who might challenge his authority. He'd started holding meetings that I wasn't invited to, making decisions about systems I'd built without consulting me. We need to modernize our approach, Jake announced during one of the few department meetings I was still included in. Kenneth's systems are solid, but they're built on outdated frameworks. We need someone with fresh ideas to take us into the future. Fresh ideas. Like hiring his college fraternity brothers who'd never worked in corporate IT. Like outsourcing critical maintenance to the lowest bidder. like implementing cutting-edge solutions that any competent programmer could see were disasters waiting to happen. I watched it all with growing certainty that they were planning to make me the scapegoat for their incompetence. Every system failure, every security concern, every client complaint, it would all be blamed on the legacy infrastructure that Kenneth Miller had built. So I prepared my insurance policy. Over the course of 6 months, I discreetly created what I called my digital insurance vault. Every email, every system modification, every piece of evidence that showed who had really built what, who had really made which decisions, who had really been responsible for Dataflow's success. I documented Jake's failures and Marcus's cover-ups. I recorded conversations where they'd admitted to cutting corners on security to save money. Most importantly, I created a complete backup of every critical system, along with detailed documentation that only I possessed. If they wanted to frame me for their failures, I'd make sure the truth survived their lies. The end began on a Tuesday morning in March, during what Marcus called an emergency leadership meeting. I wasn't invited, but I didn't need to be. The conference room had glass walls, and I could see everything from my desk. Marcus was animated, gesturing wildly, while Jake nodded along like a bobblehead. The PowerPoint presentation on the screen was too far away to read, but I caught glimpses of organizational charts and budget projections. Whatever they were planning, it involved significant changes to the IT department. Around noon, Jake emerged from the meeting with a smirk that made my skin crawl. He walked directly to my desk, hands in his pockets, radiating the kind of confidence that only comes from having powerful relatives. "Hey, Kenneth," he said, perching on the edge of my desk with casual disrespect. "Marcus wants to see you in his office. Something about the client data from last week." My blood turned to ice. The client data from last week had been perfectly secure until Jake had insisted on implementing his enhanced encryption protocol, despite my warnings that it wasn't ready for production. When the system had failed, I'd worked 36 hours straight to recover everything without losing a single file. I'd saved their asses, and now they were going to use it to destroy me. "Did he say what specifically about the client data?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Jake's smirk widened. "I think you know." I knew exactly what this was. I'd been preparing for this moment for years. I walked to Marcus's office with the calm of a man who'd already seen the end of the movie. Whatever accusation they were about to make, whatever evidence they thought they had, whatever story they'd constructed to justify destroying my career, I was ready. Marcus was sitting behind his desk when I entered, wearing the expression of a disappointed father about to punish a wayward child. Jake stood beside him, arms crossed, barely containing his excitement. "Kenneth, we need to talk about what happened with the Morrison Industries account last week," Marcus began, his voice heavy with false gravitas. "Morrison Industries, our biggest client, the account that generated nearly 30% of Dataflow's revenue, the account that Jake had nearly destroyed with his reckless experimentation." "What about it?" I asked. "Our investigation has revealed that the data breach was caused by vulnerabilities in your legacy systems," Marcus continued, sliding a folder across the desk. "Vulnerabilities that you failed to address despite repeated warnings." I opened the folder and almost laughed out loud. The evidence was a masterpiece of creative fiction. System logs that had been selectively edited, email conversations taken completely out of context, technical reports that blamed infrastructure problems on outdated security protocols, and insufficient oversight by senior systems personnel. They'd spent weeks constructing this narrative, carefully crafting a story that painted me as the incompetent old-timer whose negligence had nearly cost them their biggest client. According to these documents, Jake was the hero who discovered the breach and worked tirelessly to contain the damage I'd caused. "There was no data breach," I said quietly. "The logs clearly show." "The logs show that your nephew's encryption experiment crashed the backup servers," I interrupted. "I spent a day and a half recovering from his mistake. Morrison Industries never lost a single file." Marcus's expression hardened. "Kenneth, I understand that this is difficult to accept, but the evidence is clear. Your systems are outdated, your security protocols are insufficient, and your attitude toward modernization has become a liability." "My attitude toward incompetence, you mean?" Jake stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "Maybe if you weren't so resistant to new ideas, we wouldn't be in this situation." I looked at this kid who'd never built anything, never fixed anything, never stayed up all night, saving a company that didn't deserve saving. This privileged child who'd been handed opportunities I'd spent decades earning. "New ideas," I repeated, "like the encryption protocol that corrupted 3 terabytes of client data?" "That was a learning experience," Jake shot back. "At least I'm trying to move us forward, instead of clinging to ancient technology." Ancient technology. The systems that had run flawlessly for 15 years, while generating hundreds of millions in revenue. The infrastructure that had never failed, never been breached, never caused a single client to lose data. Marcus raised his hand to silence Jake. "Kenneth, I'm going to be direct with you. Data flow is moving in a new direction, and frankly, you're not moving with us. Your refusal to adapt, combined with this latest incident, has forced us to make some difficult decisions." Here it comes, I thought. The moment I'd been preparing for since I found that first suspicious code modification all those years ago. "We're terminating your employment, effective immediately." The words hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. 18 years of my life, dismissed in a single sentence. "On what grounds?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Marcus gestured to the folder of fabricated evidence. "Gross negligence, resulting in potential data breach. Failure to maintain adequate security protocols. Insubordination and resistance to necessary modernization efforts." Translation: they needed someone to blame for their failures, and I was the most convenient target. "You have 10 minutes to gather your personal belongings," Marcus continued, his voice taking on the cold efficiency of a corporate executioner. "Security will escort you from the building. Your final paycheck will be mailed to your home address. 10 minutes. To pack up 18 years of my life. To say goodbye to systems I'd built from scratch. To walk away from the only career I'd ever known." I looked at Marcus Thompson, this man I'd once respected, this CEO I'd helped build into a multimillionaire. His face showed no remorse, no gratitude, no acknowledgement of everything I'd sacrificed for his success. Then I looked at Jake, practically vibrating with excitement at my downfall. This incompetent nepotism hire who would now take credit for everything I'd built while inevitably destroying it through his own ignorance. And I smiled. "No problem," I said. The confidence in my voice seemed to catch them off guard. Marcus frowned, clearly expecting tears, or begging, or desperate protestations of innocence. I said no problem, I repeated, standing up from my chair. 10 minutes is more than enough time. Because they had no idea what they'd just unleashed. They thought they were firing a broken-down old employee who'd outlived his usefulness. They had no clue they were about to face the wrath of a man who'd spent 3 years documenting their every crime, their every lie, their every moment of breathtaking incompetence. As I walked back to my desk to collect my few personal items, I could feel their confused stares burning into my back. They'd expected me to crumble, to beg for mercy, to go quietly into that corporate good night. Instead, I was about to show them what 18 years of patience and preparation could accomplish when properly motivated. My ace in the hole wasn't just evidence or documentation, or even the backup systems they didn't know existed. My ace in the hole was that I'd spent nearly 2 decades becoming absolutely indispensable to a company that was about to discover just how dispensable they really were. The first domino fell exactly 72 hours after they escorted me out of that building. I was sitting in my home office, sipping coffee and reading the morning news, when my phone started buzzing with text messages. Former colleagues, people I hadn't heard from in months, all sending me variations of the same panicked message. Ken, what the hell is happening at Dataflow? I pulled up the company's website and couldn't help but smile. The entire client portal was down. Not just slow, not just glitchy, completely, utterly, catastrophically offline. The error message was beautiful in its simplicity. Service temporarily unavailable. We apologize for any inconvenience. My phone rang. Sarah's name on the caller ID. Kenneth, Emma just called from college. She said something about Dataflow being on the news. I switched on CNN, and there it was. Major data management firm experiences widespread system failure. The reporter was standing outside Dataflow's headquarters, explaining how several major clients had been unable to access their data for hours. Seems like they're having some technical difficulties, I told Sarah, trying to keep the satisfaction out of my voice. What I didn't tell her was that I knew exactly why their systems were failing. The automated maintenance scripts I'd written, the ones that had kept Dataflow running smoothly for over a decade, had been scheduled to update their security certificates. Without my oversight, Jake had apparently decided to optimize the process by removing what he called redundant verification steps. Those redundant steps were the only thing preventing a cascade failure across their entire network. By noon, Dataflow stock had dropped 12%. By evening, it was down 23%, and 3 major clients had issued public statements expressing concern about service reliability. My phone rang again. This time, it was my old colleague, Maria Santos, one of the few people at Dataflow who'd always treated me with respect. Ken, I know you probably don't want to hear from us right now, but we're in serious trouble. The whole system is falling apart, and Jake has no idea how to fix it. That's unfortunate, I said neutrally. Marcus is freaking out. Morrison Industries is threatening to pull their contract. Ken, I know what they did to you was wrong, but... Maria, I appreciate you calling. But I'm not a Dataflow employee anymore, remember? I was fired for incompetence. There was a long pause. Ken, whatever's happening here, it started right after you left. That can't be a coincidence. She was right, of course. But it wasn't sabotage in the way she was thinking. I hadn't planted any viruses or logic bombs. I'd simply removed myself from a system that had become completely dependent on my knowledge and oversight. For 18 years, I'd been the immune system of Dataflow's infrastructure. every potential problem, every security vulnerability, every maintenance issue. I'd been the one identifying and solving them before they could cause damage. Jake and Marcus had convinced themselves that the systems ran themselves, never realizing that I was the one keeping their digital house of cards from collapsing. Now they were finding out what data flow looked like without Kenneth Miller. The second wave hit on Friday. I was having lunch with Emma, who'd driven home from college after hearing about the news coverage. "Dad, is it true what they're saying online? That data flow is basically falling apart?" I looked at my daughter, this brilliant young woman who'd somehow turned out amazing despite having a father who'd missed half her childhood for a company that had discarded him like garbage. "What are they saying online?" Emma pulled out her phone and showed me a Reddit thread titled, "Data Flow Systems Total Meltdown, Inside Sources Welcome." The comments were brutal. Current and former employees sharing horror stories about management incompetence, security shortcuts, and a toxic corporate culture that prioritized profits over everything else. Someone calling themselves Deep Backup has been posting really detailed stuff about system failures and cover-ups, Emma said. Like, really technical stuff that sounds legit. I took a sip of my coffee and tried to look appropriately concerned. That's unfortunate. I hope whoever's sharing that information is being careful about confidentiality agreements. What I didn't tell Emma was that Deep Backup was one of several anonymous accounts I'd been using to strategically release information to tech forums, industry blogs, and social media platforms. Nothing that violated my NDAs directly, but enough insider knowledge to confirm what everybody was starting to suspect. Data flow was a house built on sand, and the foundation was finally giving way. The weekend brought the third wave. Marcus himself called my personal cell phone at 11 p.m. on Saturday, waking me from the first peaceful sleep I'd had in months. "Kenneth, we need to talk." His voice sounded haggard, desperate. Gone was the confident CEO who'd fired me for his nephew's incompetence. This was a man watching his empire crumble in real time. "I think you have the wrong number, Marcus. I don't work for you anymore." "Ken, please. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But we can work this out. The board is asking questions. Clients are panicking, and frankly, we need your expertise to get through this crisis." I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. What kind of crisis? The Morrison Industries contract is gone. They're not just threatening to leave. They've already started migrating to Technova. 3 other major clients are demanding meetings about service guarantees, and the system failures aren't stopping. Technova, Dataflow's biggest competitor, and coincidentally, the company that had offered me a position just 2 weeks ago after I'd discreetly reached out to their CTO with some insights about market opportunities. "That sounds like a Jake problem," I said. "He's the senior systems architect now, right? The one with all the fresh ideas?" Marcus's silence spoke volumes. "Kenneth, I'll be straight with you. Jake is in over his head. The consulting firm we hired to evaluate our systems is recommending a complete infrastructure overhaul that could take months and cost millions. But if you came back, if we could work together to stabilize things..." "What exactly are you offering?" "Your old position back, with a 20% salary increase, stock options, and we can discuss Jake's role going forward." 20%. After 18 years of being underpaid and undervalued, they were offering me a 20% raise to clean up the mess they'd created. "That's a generous offer, Marcus, but I'm afraid I'm not available." "Not available?" Ken, I know you haven't found another job yet. My sources tell me. Your sources are outdated. I start at Technova on Monday. CTO position, actually. 60% salary increase, full benefits, and equity that actually means something. The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. You're going to Technova? They were very interested in my insights about the data management industry. Apparently, there's going to be a significant market shift in the next few months, and they want someone with experience navigating transitions. Marcus's voice turned cold. Kenneth, you signed a non-compete agreement. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. Marcus, you fired me for cause. According to your own termination paperwork, I was grossly negligent and insubordinate. Non-compete clauses don't typically apply when you terminate someone for performance issues. We could sue. With what legal team? I heard Technova just poached your head of legal. Something about better opportunities and a more stable work environment. That was true. Jennifer Walsh, Dataflow's general counsel, had indeed accepted a position at Technova. What Marcus didn't know was that Jennifer had been quietly documenting his questionable business practices for months, just waiting for the right opportunity to escape. Kenneth, listen to me. You think you're being clever, but you're burning bridges you might need someday. The bridge was already burned, Marcus. You burned it when you decided to frame me for your nephew's incompetence. I hung up and turned off my phone. Through the bedroom window, I could see my neighbor's porch light, and beyond that, the faint glow of the city where Dataflow's headquarters stood. Somewhere in that building, Jake was probably staring at error messages he couldn't understand, desperately trying to fix systems he'd never bothered to learn. The irony was perfect. They'd fired me to make room for the future, and instead, they'd hired their own destruction. Sunday morning brought the news I'd been waiting for. The headline in the business section made me smile. SEC launches investigation into data flow systems following whistleblower complaint. The article was light on details, but the implications were clear. Someone had provided federal investigators with evidence of financial irregularities, security violations, and potential fraud at Dataflow. The company's stock had been suspended from trading pending the investigation. My phone had been ringing all morning, but I'd left it off. I knew exactly who was calling and why. Instead, I sat on my back porch with Sarah, drinking coffee and watching Emma practice basketball shots in the driveway. Ken, I have to ask, Sarah said quietly. Did you have something to do with all this? I considered my answer carefully. I documented everything I witnessed during my time at Dataflow. When the appropriate authorities expressed interest in that documentation, I cooperated fully with their investigation. Sarah nodded slowly. And the system failures? I built those systems to require active maintenance and oversight. When I left, that oversight left with me. The failures are a natural consequence of removing institutional knowledge without proper transition planning. And Technova? They offered me a position where my experience and expertise would be valued rather than exploited. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Emma sink shot after shot. She'd inherited my focus and determination, but unlike me, she'd learned to balance ambition with perspective. I'm proud of you, Sarah said finally. For what? For not letting them destroy you. For finding a way to fight back without becoming like them. That afternoon, Marcus showed up at my house. I watched through the living room window as his Mercedes pulled into my driveway. He sat behind the wheel for several minutes, probably working up the courage to face me. When he finally emerged, he looked like he'd aged 5 years and 5 days. I opened the front door before he could ring the bell. "This is a surprise. We need to talk, Kenneth, privately." I glanced back at Sarah, who was watching from the kitchen doorway. She nodded slightly, her way of saying she trusted me to handle this. "We can talk on the porch," I said, stepping outside and closing the door behind me. Marcus looked around nervously, as if he expected reporters to jump out from behind the bushes. "Kenneth, I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about your termination." "Really? What part was misunderstood? The false accusations, the fabricated evidence, or the public humiliation?" The board forced my hand. They wanted someone to blame for the Morrison incident, and so you chose me. I chose the path that seemed least damaging to the company overall. Jake is family, and the optics of firing the CEO's nephew would have been problematic. I stared at this man who just admitted to destroying my career to protect his own family member. The optics. "Kenneth, I know how that sounds, but you have to understand the position I was in. The board was demanding answers. Clients were asking questions, and I needed to show decisive leadership. By framing an innocent employee." Marcus's composure finally cracked. "Innocent? Ken, you've been actively sabotaging us since the day you left. The system failures, the leaked information, the SEC investigation. You think I'm stupid? You think I don't know this is all connected to you?" I leaned back in my porch chair, studying his face. "Marcus, I think you're giving me far too much credit. I'm just an incompetent old employee who was fired for negligence, remember? How could someone like that possibly cause problems for a dynamic modern company like Dataflow? Cut the act, Kenneth. I know you're behind this." "Behind what exactly? Your nephew's inability to maintain systems he doesn't understand? Your clients losing confidence in a company that can't keep its servers running? The SEC investigating financial irregularities that existed long before I was terminated?" Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me a screenshot of a news article. Technova just announced they've signed 4 new major clients this week. 4 clients who happen to leave Dataflow in the past month. That's not a coincidence. "You're right," I said. "It's not a coincidence. It's the free market working exactly as designed. When one company fails to provide reliable service, customers move to competitors who can." "Kenneth, I'll be honest with you. Dataflow is in serious trouble. The SEC investigation is just the beginning. We're facing multiple lawsuits. Our insurance company is threatening to drop us, and our remaining clients are demanding guarantees we can't provide." "That sounds like a management problem." Marcus leaned forward, desperation clear in his voice. "I'm prepared to make you an offer that goes far beyond what we discussed on the phone. 50% salary increase, immediate promotion to Chief Technology Officer, stock options that vest immediately, and a formal apology for the circumstances of your termination. Chief Technology Officer, the position I should have been promoted to years ago. The role Jake would have eventually occupied after destroying everything I'd built." "What about Jake?" "Jake will be reassigned to other duties." "And the investigation?" "If you came back, if you helped us stabilize the situation, I'm confident we could work with the authorities to resolve any outstanding issues." I pretended to consider his offer while watching Emma continue her basketball practice. She'd been working on her free throws for months, methodically improving her accuracy through repetition and focus. She understood something Marcus never had. Excellence couldn't be faked or inherited or bought. It had to be earned through dedication and integrity. Marcus, I appreciate the offer, but I'm afraid it's too late for that. Too late? Kenneth, we can fix this. Together, we can rebuild data flow stronger than ever. Data flow is beyond repair. The problems aren't technical. They're cultural. You built a company that rewards incompetence, punishes honesty, and treats employees as disposable resources. No amount of money can fix that kind of fundamental rot. Marcus's face hardened. So this is revenge. You're going to destroy everything we built because your feelings got hurt. I didn't destroy anything, Marcus. I simply removed myself from an unsustainable situation. What's happening to data flow now is the natural consequence of 18 years of poor decisions, ethical shortcuts, and management by nepotism. The SEC investigation is based on legitimate concerns about financial practices that predate my termination by years. If data flow has nothing to hide, I'm sure the investigation will conclude quickly. Marcus stood up abruptly, his mask of corporate civility finally slipping completely. You self-righteous bastard. You think you're so much better than everyone else, but you're just a bitter old man who can't accept that the industry moved on without him. I remained seated, watching him pace across my porch like a caged animal. The industry didn't move on without me, Marcus. I moved on from the industry. There's a difference. Technova won't protect you forever. When this all comes out, when people realize what you did, your reputation will be destroyed. My reputation is that I spent 18 years building systems that never failed, never lost data, and generated hundreds of millions in revenue. That reputation is intact. We'll see about that. Marcus stormed off my porch and back to his car, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. As he backed out of my driveway, I could see him on his phone, probably calling his lawyers, or his board members, or whoever he thought could still save him from the consequences of his own actions. I sat there for a long time after he left, watching the sun set behind the trees in my backyard. For the first time in 18 years, I wasn't worried about system alerts, or server crashes, or emergency maintenance calls. My phone was still off, and I planned to keep it that way until Monday morning. Emma finished her basketball practice and joined me on the porch, sweaty and exhausted, but smiling. Was that your old boss? She asked. Former boss, yes. He seemed upset. He's having a difficult week. Emma studied my face with the perceptive intelligence she'd inherited from her mother. Dad, did you do something to his company? I considered how to answer that question honestly. I stopped protecting them from the consequences of their own bad decisions. Is that the same thing? That's a very good question, sweetheart. What do you think? Emma was quiet for a moment, bouncing her basketball while she thought. I think sometimes people get so used to someone else solving their problems that they forget how to solve them themselves. And when that person isn't there anymore, all the problems they were hiding suddenly become visible. My daughter, the philosophy major, she'd learned to think clearly about complex moral questions in a way that had taken me decades to master. That's a very mature perspective, I told her. I learned it from watching you, Dad. You always taught me that actions have consequences, even when those consequences are delayed. We sat together in comfortable silence as darkness settled over the neighborhood. In the distance, I could see the lights of the city where Dataflow's headquarters stood, probably mostly empty except for a skeleton crew of security guards and whoever was desperately trying to keep their remaining systems online. Tomorrow, I would start my new job at Technova. I would build new systems, work with colleagues who valued expertise over politics, and help create something worthy of the effort I invested in it. Tonight, I was just a father, sitting on his porch with his daughter, finally free from the weight of 18 years of misplaced loyalty. My phone buzzed with a text message. Sarah's name on the lock screen. Dinner's ready when you are. And Ken? Welcome home. I looked at Emma, who was grinning at me with the kind of pure joy I hadn't seen from her since she was a little girl. Ready to go inside, Dad? More than ready, sweetheart. More than ready. As we walked toward the house, I could hear the distant sound of sirens somewhere in the city. Emergency vehicles rushing to solve someone else's crisis, racing against time to prevent disasters that might already be unstoppable. For the first time in 18 years, those sirens weren't my problem.